So look, thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Amy, and my co-founder Sonia is here, and we have set up something called Every One of Us. Essentially, we started this last year when we woke up to the climate emergency that is now, across the papers all the time, thankfully. But when we woke up to it last year, we felt really concerned and really quite shocked that we hadn't been all over it up until that point. So our response was that we would set this up in a hope that this would give us something to channel our action and make a difference. But we do this aside from our full-time jobs. So day to day and outside of lockdown, I'm a director at a company in London, which helps to bring businesses together with education. And Sonia? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
This was going to happen, by the way, everybody. Amy and I are muting each other so we don't get feedback, but there was a big risk that it was going to go horribly wrong, and it's gone horribly wrong in the first 20 seconds, so we're doing really well. So yes, I'm an executive coach, and I work with great people who want to lead purposeful lives. And then our mission that Amy and I are doing together is so on purpose for us. It's so close to our hearts. So for me, it's just total mix, a total perfect mix in terms of where I'm spending my energy.
So basically what it means and what it looks like is that we, aside from our day job, are researching things that we can all be doing in our day-to-day lives. And we whittle all of that information down into one email that we send out every Friday with an action that you can easily do. And our target audience really are busy people like all of us who are trying to cram everything into the hectic day today and still do good for the planet. So thanks ever so much for joining us. If this is your first workshop session using this platform, just to let you know, if you double click the screen that you want to see, so we're going to have some slides in a minute, that will make that the main screen that you can see. There's a chat function where you can say hi, ask any questions, etc. We're going to run through some discussion points, and then there'll be plenty of time at the end for us to have a broader discussion. So if there is anything that you'd particularly like to cover, feel free to use the chat box for that. So, Sonia, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So shall we just have a quick check-in to see how everyone's feeling about climate change right now? So if you were to think of one word that describes how climate change makes you feel, and just put that in the chat box, that would be great. So just take a minute to consider that. So a word that kind of sums up how the whole climate situation makes you feel right now. Hello, Lisa. So Lisa, if you just joined, we're sort of just doing a quick temperature check to see how everyone's feeling about the climate situation right now. So one word to describe how it feels to you. Yeah, it so is HB, and that's why we're particularly excited to be here today, because it feels like we've properly got the chance of a lifetime. And actually, it's so interesting that you've put that in as a comment, because actually, if we'd asked this question before lockdown, what we found is the three most common things that people say. Hilary, I saw you on failing and hear you on how much it can feel like that. The three big things were totally overwhelmed, just too much information, just such a massive problem. Really frustrated with governments and businesses, how can you just not be sorting this out? Like, what is going on? And thirdly, feeling almost insignificant. Can we actually even make a difference to this? It's like quite a cocktail of really tricky emotions. But what was really interesting and to us, and I'm again curious to see how you all feel, is also just this massive determination, like we are not going to let this one go. And I'm sure just by the fact that you're all here today doing this pretty much means the same. So,
Sure. So if you have got a screen where you can see the three people, so myself, Sonia, and the slides, if you want to double click on the slides, we just want to do a quick sense check on what we think we know. So these are the some of the biggest industries that are impacting climate change at the moment, and the list on the left or the list on the right are listed in the right order in terms of the biggest contributors to the lowest. So agriculture is a biggie for both. That's the biggest. But which do you think is ordered correctly, option A or option B, in terms of the industries with the biggest emissions to the lowest? If you can put that in the chat, that would be great, and then we'll run through the answer. Thanks, Lisa. You're saying B. Any other guesses? 50-50 chance. B from Susie. Excellent. All highly informed. Love it. So that is the right answer. It is indeed B. So agriculture, forestry and land use contributes 24% of CO2 emissions globally. Fashion is at around 10%. And as many of you will know, and hence the session that's going on at the moment as well, talking about fashion, it is fast becoming a huge issue in terms of climate change. Cement was something I'd never particularly thought about before, but it turns out that's an 8% contributor. And if apparently cement was a country, it would be the third largest contributor to climate change behind the US and China. Then got data centers, which is, again, something that is coming up to being an increasing problem for climate change. All of this data that we're sharing all the time and using all the time is being stored. And at the moment, we're managing to sort of mitigate the risk of that from a climate change perspective due to technological advancements. But if our consumption of data continues at the current rate, that is going to become a major problem and keep going up that list. And aviation represents about 2.5%. Transport itself as a whole is a much bigger deal. That's about a quarter, similar to agriculture. But the aviation element is about 2.5%. But of course, it's super important for us as individuals, because that is a key way that we can help mitigate our carbon footprint. So let's just have a look at what makes up our carbon footprint as individuals. In the UK, there's really three big things. So you've got travel, food and drink, and household energy. So if you're going to do anything, it's really handy just to have those three things kind of in your head. And it explains why the sort of big hitters, the things that David Attenborough and others call on us to do, are things like fly less, drive less. That will tackle our travel part of our footprint. Eat less meat and dairy, waste less food, which I'm sure is close to all of your hearts at this Zero Waste event, and use less heating. And I think for me, having sort of switched on to this about a year ago, the biggest change that's led to at the moment is the fact that I'm eating much less meat, in fact, no meat now. I sort of tapered it off, and this is from someone who used to eat steak every week, pretty much without fail. But since I found out about what a huge contribution it makes, I thought, well, actually, that's no great hardship for me to cut that out. And I've been discovering things like the Bosch Boys that do this amazing chili recipe. I can highly recommend it, which tastes just as good, if not better, than a meat-filled chili. So I'm learning lots of new things as I go, but certainly feeling better for it. And Sonia?
Yeah, so I mean, my hands down biggest challenge has been the heating one, because I just totally love to have really long baths and then sit in them and read books and then top it up with hot water. So that's been extremely difficult. But I guess the biggest challenge is the flying one. which I just think is such a problem in the times that we live. My family are literally on 4 continents, and we're a really close family. So it really throws up some really tricky issues for us. You know, it's kind of like, how do we work that out? And we've even sort of thought, okay, well, maybe we meet in one place for a longer time rather than going and seeing each other individually. But you're just, you know, just really having to think about how we can really change this default stuff that we've got used to. Should I go from here?
Please do. So we're going to move away from the slides for a little bit. So feel free to just double click on the video with the slides, and that will minimize it so you can see faces again.
Yeah. So we know this stuff, right? We know we've got to fly. We know these are the basics, and we're all doing as much as we can towards it. And at the same time, we're sort of thinking, well, what more can we do? Of course, there's an absolute ton. But because this is a zero waste festival, we thought we'd hone in to the zero waste bit of it. I know that you're all zero waste ninjas. You know, you've got the plastic sorted out, you've got the food stuff, you've got the fashion stuff. So Aimee and I were thinking, well, what's the stuff on a zero waste level that really surprised us? In fact, a couple of them almost made us fall off our chair. So one which Aimee almost has just alluded to is data centers. So how do we stop wasting our storage in data centers? So we started to dig into it a little bit, and it turns out that 94% of the data at data centers is basically cyber landfill. It's just not used. And it's just contributing to this absolutely massive carbon footprint. So we did this little action about clearing out our inboxes so that we could make headway into, you know, getting a bit of that junk out of the trunk, so to speak. And it's actually just been incredible. We started with ourselves. We always start with ourselves. And we had 10,000 email. Maybe it was even 30. It was like some crazy number of emails, and we deleted them. It was about 8 gig each. So that was an email thing. The other thing that we realized about emails was that spam is the least of the problem. The real problem is us. So every time we send an email that's got attachments, it's that much more energy intensive. So not just in terms of us actually using our computers to send it, but of course when it actually reaches a cloud and has to be stored there. So that was one aspect that surprised us. The other was reply all. So reply all from a data storage energy perspective is basically really bad, which is great because it's actually really annoying to be CC'd on everything. So hopefully if that takes off, we won't have to be copied into emails. We don't want anything to do with it. But basically we send these actions out every week, as Aimee was saying. And this is one of the actions that we had the most response on. Like, people just couldn't believe it. We had one of our subscribers saying, I'm just sitting here watching You've Got Mail while I'm deleting all my mail. But anyway, everyone's, you know, just cleared out their inboxes, saved all this space, but also just like this mental headspace. So interesting, you know, just no longer have that stuff just subliminally cluttering our minds. So that was one real biggie. Don't know whether any of you knew about that one. We certainly didn't. In fact, this whole journey of doing every one of us has been basically total voyage of discovery. We spend a lot of our day going, did you know that? How could we not know that? That's basically what our life sounds like these days. So that's one. So that's one way, a different way of reducing waste. Another is not wasting water. So, I mean, water sort of feels obvious in the sense that it's a really precious resource that really we just should never waste. But it's just so massively energy intensive. You know, everything from it getting pumped to getting pumped to us, then us heating it up, then it having to be disposed and filtered, and that whole process is massively energy intensive. So one of the very first actions that we did when we started this project was having shorter showers. So the average shower is 7.5 minutes, which we will get, you know, a bit taken aback by. And if we all shaved 1 minute off that shower, it would save the UK £215 million in energy bills. Just extraordinary. So we sort of went hard on it, and our action was having a 3 to 4 minute shower. That's what went out to everybody in our second week. And to much dismay, what do you mean we've got to have shorter showers? This is our thinking time. But we did it with, we created a little playlist of 3 and 4 minute songs. And the idea was you had to press start and be out of the shower before the song was finished. It was actually quite fun, except Aimee was a total Hitler about it. And she said, well, you have to, your timing starts from when you turn the shower, so you're waiting for it to get hot.
Of course it does.
Right. She's very strict because she knows this is my nemesis. But anyway, so that's a great one. That's another low waste angle. And then the third one that we wanted to share with you today is ditching the next day delivery. So in other words, reducing our waste in terms of unnecessary fuel. So get this, right? If we do a next day or a same day delivery, it basically gets delivered on a half empty van. That, in terms of energy and emissions, is 35 times more energy intensive than a full van. And when you think that Amazon deliveries are between 3 and 4 billion a year, and that most of us used to maybe just tick next day without really thinking about it, it's just a huge, huge dent that we can make, especially if there's a lot of us doing it together. And the flip side of that was also about returns. So it's kind of a double whammy. I'm definitely guilty of this from ordering, not from Amazon actually, because I hate Amazon, but I got some stuff from John Lewis, and but I ordered 2 sizes, you know, because I'm like, oh, I'm not sure they're going to fit, how it's going to look, and then you have to return stuff. So, you know, just us getting really cognizant about the impact of those. So those were our zero waste twists for today. Yeah,
and I think, you know, if there are others that you think we should be sharing, please do let us know in the chat. We'll happily dig into them. Sonia, sorry, I'm just getting some feedback with these headphones for some reason. I think the other thing that we've been hearing from people is like, look, it's all very well and good doing these actions, but these all sound quite small, and the problem that we're facing is huge. So really, is this actually going to make a difference? And we've thought really carefully about that, and, you know, and done a lot of reading, etc., on it. And the way we look at it is really in 3 ways. So firstly, as individuals, we have a lot more power than I think we give ourselves credit for. You know, there's clearly the piece about, you know, how do we live, our habits, our day-to-day lives. And, you know, as people who are interested in zero waste, you will know this, you know, it involves a change of your habits and your routines to be able to reduce your waste. There's also the, you know, what do you buy? So how are you using your money to support the companies who are really thinking about this big problem and tackling it in the right way? So what are the smart purchases that you can be making to contribute to this situation? But then you've got, you know, our voice. You know, no change happens without people calling for it. You know, people say it's the role of big business and it's the role of government, and absolutely it is, but it's not binary. You know, it's got to be us calling for it and then making the change to make it as easy as possible for all of us. And the final thing is about rejuvenation. So what are we doing to actually sort of invest or spend time to rejuvenate the planet? So to kind of bring that to life, for example, we've had an action recently about bee bombs, so the little compressed bits of soil with wildflower seeds in it that you can scatter around your garden to try and encourage wildflower growth to support the bee population. You know, bees pollinate a third of all our food. Super important and obviously very lovely in their own right. And so there's things that you can do, like planting trees, planting these wildflowers to rejuvenate the planet. In terms of your voice, we did an action on HS2, which we found sort of highly complex, because obviously environmentalists are saying, well, HS2 is terrible, it shouldn't happen. But then sort of coming at it from the other angle, you're thinking, well, train travel is surely better than cars or trucks, etc. So the more that can go on train lines that are efficient, surely that's the better. So we did an action, and feel free to check it out on our website, that has all the sort of pros and cons from both sides of the argument. And really where we came down to with that was actually, we're in such a crucial time period right now. You know, we've got the next 10, 20, 30 years absolute tops, but this next decade's super important to make the changes we need, and therefore building something that will involve such a huge destruction of ancient woodlands that are irreplaceable, when there appear to be viable alternatives to achieve the same objectives, then we should be campaigning for that. So we shared Chris Packham's petition on that to try to challenge government to think through those alternatives in more detail. So that's just sort of a flavour of how we think about the actions that we send out each week, and that's one element of our power. The other piece, and again, as you'll understand, having started your zero waste journey, is once you start to do something, it then permeates your thinking on everything, and you start to question more things, and you start to look into more things, and you start to read the labels of stuff, or you start to investigate and start asking questions. So just doing one simple action and then perhaps another, it just starts to set your mind on a sort of inquiry and a more curious thing, where you'll challenge the status quo in your day-to-day life in all sorts of ways. And then finally, you know, if I do something, if Sonia does something, if all of you do something, and then your families do it, and in fact, you know, we're on a mission to get 1 million of us together taking action. And imagine if we all did that, the difference that we could make cumulatively in doing these actions, clearing out our inboxes, or all planting wildflower seeds, etc. We could have a huge impact. So I think there's 3 bits to this. So if anyone says, well, it's not really going to make a difference, well, you probably know how much you've influenced people around you in your daily life with the habits that you've got and the actions that you take already. So the more of us that do it, the better. So now I think we are going to go back to the slides. So if you could just double click on the slides just to bring it up so you can see it. Sonia's going to talk us through our mindset.
Yeah, and just to add to what Amy's saying, we've really felt that in our own lives, like how so much of this has been about us all as a society just getting so divorced from nature, for example, and just realizing, last year, for example, was the first time I'd ever grown a tomato, and it was like seriously the most exciting event, possibly of the year, that first salad. But it just really changed, just that one thing, just completely changed my relationship with food. Not that I was ever particularly wasteful, but we've all had that skanky salad bag, right, in the fridge. Yeah, and then it made me realize about pesticides. So, we all try and buy organic, but it's expensive, and it kind of feels like more of a luxury. And now it's stopped feeling like a luxury, because I was like, oh my God, so if I spray this tomato plant and then this poor bee comes along and gets hurt, well, that's just awful. That just can't happen. So it suddenly just became an emotional response as opposed to another one. So it's really interesting how that then just, keeps rolling forward and starts to connect, certainly for us, really connect us into the world in a really, really different way. Anyway, I was probably going slightly off topic. So coming back, so one of the things that feels important is that, we've got this massive challenge ahead of us. And we all know how big it is and the reality that we're dealing with. So if we're really going to gird our loins and be in there, for the ride, how do we want that to feel? And I don't know whether you've felt this, but we certainly did. When we started out, was it all started to feel like less? We've got to fly less, we've got to drive less, we've got to eat less meat. Basically, it felt like you just couldn't do anything. Like this grey world that you almost felt afraid to breathe in case it added to the CO2. And part of this whole thing, sort of linked to the tomato story I was just telling you about, is actually it's completely the other way around. And as we've all sort of experienced in lockdown, being able to slow down, be at home, be in our gardens and grow stuff, that it's just turned into this really nourishing space. And of course, that's entirely what's gone wrong with everything. And so, suddenly all of these quote unquote sacrifices or difficult habits shift into a really precious place and kind of a golden one, beautiful one. So, for example, flying less, okay. But like I was saying with my family earlier, all right, maybe we just have longer holidays together versus it be flying less. Or as we start to holiday more in England or Europe, if we're let back in, then it means that we actually get more time away because we're not on these long journeys. And we get back and we're not absolutely knackered because we've come off some awful long haul flight. And then driving less, so yeah, it's more walking and real world stuff. So one of the things that's happened to me in lockdown is Aimee was really good, she got her bike last year, but I finally got mine, and honestly, it's just the best thing ever. I'm completely addicted to it. I never want to drive my car again. And yeah, so it's just completely nourishing thing. And then we've talked about veggies versus less meat. Of course, there's a whole question about how we treat animals anyway. So, that's a whole different topic. And heating, it's kind of like, oh, well, here's this really precious resource. How do we conserve it? And so it starts to become, for us anyway, but yeah, more about cherishment, nourishment, preciousness, beauty, and that for us certainly shifted it in a really deeply profound way. So that's kind of one angle, and then there's another, and this is all our sort of journey that we're sort of sharing with you. I don't know whether you relate, but Aimee, if you wouldn't mind, so we just like to sit back and watch some slides we're going to show you, and just notice how you feel. And if you haven't done so already, you might just want to double click on the slide, so that it comes up high on your screen. Thanks, Amy. So how did that feel when you were watching that progression? Would anyone like to share in the chat box? That'd be lovely if you can. No pressure though. So certainly for us, when we first started this, we were really in slight meltdown, not slight meltdown, actually proper meltdown about climate emergency, just in an absolute state about it. And but we realised over time, we've been working on this project, just coming up to a year, that it was killing us. You know, that narrative of emergency was literally destroying us. It was making it almost impossible to do stuff. It was that big and that scary that it was almost robbing our own energy and certainly affecting our state of mind. You know, we'd read that many climate books. And we got to a point where we said, okay, you know, we just need to switch off from climate books for a while because this is too much. The message is so hard. And yeah, just getting actually depressed. It's really tough. Because also we really care so much and we were going through these really difficult feelings. And so we found our own narrative starting to shift, thank goodness, and sort of shifting away from anti-emission, which again is that sort of grey fight, towards regeneration and rejuvenation, and away from doomsday, where we'll, you know, toast, towards possibility. Who knows what we can do? And really, ultimately, for us, you know, from fear to love. And it literally changed everything for us. You know, it stopped feeling like this fight to the death and more like looking after something that's very precious and needs to be looked after. And so the kind of core of how we are in this and how we stand and who we want to be in this is really from the place of the earth doesn't want to be saved, it wants to be loved. You know, we feel like if we do that, and we all do that, and with every single tiny choice that we make that a loving choice for the planet, then it just completely transforms. And so for us, that was really almost a healing experience. We were like, oh, okay, we can do this again. So that was our time.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you know, it can sometimes feel like there's an action list that we all just need to check off, and then we've done it, and then we've sorted climate change now because we've recycled our bits, or we've bought this thing, etc. And I am a little bit type A, and in my day job, that is exactly the approach that I take. I'm like, right, okay, we've got my long list of things and I've done it, I can cross it off, job done, end of story. But actually that is not what motivates me, and I don't think it actually motivates people at their core. Like in your soul, what makes you feel good is when you are giving or when you are caring, and that is the approach that we take. So in all of the actions that we send out, we're coming at it from a place of how can we really rethink our relationship with the earth and really enjoy everything that this planet has got to offer and look after it in the way that we'd look after a loved one. And so that's sort of the common thread that runs through everything that we do. But, you know, as busy people, it can be really hard to know what the things are that you could or should be doing, even if you have that mindset and the willingness. You know, what makes a good, I mean, this week we've done washing up liquid. Who knew there was so much to know about washing up liquid? But that took a good 10 to 15 hours worth of digging, I'd say, for us to find out that actually fairy liquid is derived from crude oil. And that had been my number one product in that context my whole life. So I'm like, right, okay, that needs to stop. And actually, we're using these plastic bottles all the time. And in fact, there are some really, really great companies coming out now. And there may even be some at this festival that are thinking about, you know, how can you use refills more to stop the waste, and how can we make sure that all of the ingredients are cruelty-free and good for everybody and good for the planet. So we spend loads of time sort of digging into things that might seem quite obvious, which turns out they're not. And then we have big debates as to, okay, well, what's practical and what's feasible? You know, we want them to be easy actions. And then that is what we deliver in an email every Friday into the inbox so that we can all do it together. And we love hearing from people. We've had various people suggest actions that we might want to run or look into, or things that have particularly worked for them. And what we love is the ability to sort of be that platform to share all of that intel with everybody so that we can all collectively make that difference. So as I mentioned before, we are trying to galvanize a community of 1 million of us doing this, because I think that's where we have real power. So if you are on a laptop and you've got your phone, feel free to scan this QR code and it will take you to the sign up form to join in with the actions and get that weekly email. Or you can find us on everyoneofus.co.uk, where you can see all of the actions that we've done since last end of July, I think is where we officially launched. So we've done a weekly action ever since then. So you can have a look and pick out the ones that perhaps you'd like to have a go at. Applaud yourself for the ones that you've already got nailed. And as I say, please feel free to kind of get in touch and let us know of any others that you think we should be looking at or running. But that's it from us. So
really great to have you with us. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And enjoy the rest of the festival. We'll say goodbye.